Good morning, everyone. It's nice how we've done it this morning, taking the chairs out, and we feel that there's still some of us left. Isn't that nice? So I thank you for the organisers for doing that. The song that you've been singing, O Church Arise, you may not know it, but I just checked, it's written by Northern Irish songwriter. His surname is Getty, and you want to go on YouTube, or if you've got Amazon Prime, and listen to their album, Evensong. It's just astounding, right? And as you were singing the song, it just reminded me, a lot of the songs that they write, they have this Irish lilt to them. It's beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, the Getty, it's a husband and wife team. And that's just a beautiful song that we've been singing all camp meeting. Some of you have asked, where can you watch me on YouTube? Well, generally I try and keep away from YouTube. Yeah, there's enough on YouTube already, right? If you do want to read something, you can go on a website called academia.edu. Academia.edu. You can type in Cedric Vine and you can follow me. And I try and put quite a lot of stuff on there. It's an academic site, so most of what I put on there is academic, but it's one way of sending out Adventist material to the wider world, right? I mean, I wrote something on non-combatancy, and lo and behold, someone in the Kremlin was reading it. Right? You never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen with your work. Right? I would also advise you, sign up for Richard Davidson in academia. He's an Old Testament professor at the seminary. And for Roy Gain, another Old Testament. They've put a heap of excellent material that they've produced. Right? So that's academia.edu. You know my name. Do you know my name? What is it? Cedric Vine. It's the two most beautiful words I know. Right? Cedric Vine. Right? I mean, it's true, isn't it? If you want to make people love you, just use their name. Right? Yeah. So, academia.edu. You know my name, but you can become a follower of me, of course. Yeah. But Richard Davidson and Roy Gain, right? Sign up for them as well, right? Brooks, Richard Davidson is in your church, isn't he? Yeah, and he's had a mighty influence within our church worldwide. Okay, let's start with some revision, right? What are our 5 points, everyone? The gospel of the King that we've just heard sung about. Right, what was the first point? Jesus is King, and he's a beautiful King. He's that nice blend of strength and service. This is not a king looking after his own needs. He's looking after those who need help. What was the second thing? Kings have kingdoms. So we're not lone rangers. At some point, you need to make a commitment. Love the kingdom as it is, rather than the way you want it to be. Right? Because that's the way the king treats you. Right? What was the third thing? Kings rule their kingdoms through their laws. Those laws aren't going to save you, but they will transform you. There are some things that the king would like to change in your life. Okay? And law is one of the mechanisms for doing it. It's not the only one, but it's an important one. What was the fourth thing? Kings save, laws don't. When you're in trouble, you need to reach out to the king, and he will personally intervene. And then the final thing? Kingdoms clash. We live in a contested world. Contested world. So, I think we've just about got there. Yeah, I can fly back to the US feeling as if I've at least taught something, right? Oh, remind me, why am I a Seventh-day Adventist? Do you remember that? Why am I a Seventh-day Adventist? 2 plus 8 is 10. The Son of Man, chapter 2, Mark, what does he do? He forgives sins. Chapter 2, the Son of Man, Lord of the Sabbath. Chapter 8, the Son of Man died and rose again. Chapter 8, the Son of Man, come in the clouds of glory. And then finally, chapter 2 plus 8 equals 10. The Son of Man came to serve, not be served. I mean, it's a fabulous, that's the essence of Christianity. That is the essence of Christianity. He forgives, right? So, as an Adventist, I'm no legalist. I know I am forgiven, right? And, you know, you can deep dive into the sanctuary, but the sanctuary only works because behind it there is a forgiving God. It's not like God wakes up in the morning, oh, I didn't feel like forgiving that chap. He believes in the sanctuary, better do it. Right? It's the character of God which ultimately forgives. Something happens in the mind of God, right? Which says, I choose to forgive, right? He's Lord of the Sabbath. So we have rest. Rest from like little dogs chasing our tails all the time. Right? He died and rose again. I have hope, right? If you believe Jesus died and rose again, then basically nothing can spoil your joy, right? Because death has lost its sting, and that's the last enemy, right? What was the fourth one? He's coming again. So I don't need to invest all my hopes in the princes of this world. This future resides not in the politicians' hands, but in the hands of the Son of Man. And then the final one, it's the antidote to selfishness. The Son of Man came to serve, not be served. And Lord, change my heart. So I reflect that. So we've been doing a little bit of learning, yeah? This morning, my message, and I realize that half of you need to stand up and leave halfway through to catch your planes, right? But it's a continuation of what I've been preaching with the young adults. Right? Now, at the young adult room, they let in over 30s, even though on the program it said 18 to 30. Right? So some of you might have heard some of that, even though you shouldn't have. Right? You should have been in here. But nevertheless, the Lord, what does he do? Forgives sins. He forgives sins, right? So, yeah, I should extend forgiveness as well. But what I've been sharing with the young adults, and those of you who still think you are young adults, right? I've been taking them through the Greco-Roman world and their gods and the contrast with our Lord and Christianity today. And what we've seen is that the Roman gods, the Greek gods, you never knew where you stood with them. You got up in the morning, and if it's raining, it's because Zeus is crying. That's how the Greeks described rain. Zeus is crying again, right? So Zeus is crying again. Next day, it's sunny, and you don't know why. You're at the mercy of the natural world, and unfortunately, the natural world reflects the gods. And the natural world is capricious. You never know where you stand with it. So you never know where you stand with your gods. They murder each other. They commit incest. They run off after each other's wives. They're as bad as you can get. And so in that context, many ancients rebelled. It's why you read in Acts all these pagans going along to the synagogue as God-fearers because they recognize in Judaism, in Torah, something different. A different God, a God who they can predict. One group responded, and we looked at this over in one of our worships, by turning inward. If the gods out there are just nasty and you can never predict, it's what we call high freedom religion, but low benefit religion. That was ancient religion. Christianity is high commitment and high benefit religion, compared with Greco-Roman pagan religion. So we've got this group who turn inwards. Today we see it, it's called Gnosticism, right? The modern transgenderism, that's all it is. It's just a reincarnation of ancient Gnosticism. If you don't like the gods out there, find the God within. Be true to your inner self, right? That's modern day Gnosticism. And it was one way people responded to the ancient gods in the past. But I'm going to share another way that they responded, because this is a way which I feel has impacted me more in my life and probably has impacted you. This is a message I preached a couple of months back at Village Church. So if you want to watch it again, you can. I've changed it a little, but you can go and watch this on Village's with their stream. And my title is Confessions of a Recovering Epicurean. Acts 17, Paul went to Athens and he met with two groups of philosophers. You remember who they were? The Stoics and the Epicureans. And you can read Paul's sermon to the Stoics and the Epicureans, and scholars estimate that Paul had at least a college, university level knowledge of the Stoics and the Epicureans. In the ancient world, most people were Stoics and a few were Epicureans. Today, in the West, and I know you're in the South, but it's Southwest, right? We'll include you in it for today. Most Westerners are Epicureans and a few are Stoics, right? Without even realizing it, I bet most of us here have been influenced by the philosophy of Epicurus. And it shapes our spiritual experience. Let me share a little with you about Epicurus. Right now, I don't know if that is Epicurus. Right? For all I know, that could be my dad. Right? You know, when I talk to my dad on Zoom, I ask him, Dad, what were you doing in Berrien Springs last week? I saw you. You see, my dad, you know, he's 80 and he's got white hair and a white beard. And I see him all the time driving round, right? Man, ruddy cheeks, white beard, red hair, white hair. It's my dad. They're all over the place, right? These guys, right? If you've probably seen my dad sometime. I mean, who knows if that's Epicurus? It's just an old man with a beard, right? But anyway, that's what I found. So Epicurus, you see when he lived, 341 to 270 BC. And he reacted against what he saw as this superstition, right? Everything that happens is a result of the gods. The good things that happen, oh, they were nice. I don't know why, but they were nice to me that moment. Bad things that happen, oh, they were angry with me and I'm not sure why it was. I will try and work out and I'll practice my rituals and I'll practice my superstitious practices and maybe it will keep them happy. Oh, what a tiresome way to live. And Epicurus says, no, I've had it with that. Had it with that. Let me share Epicurus's explanation for earthquakes. You can read this in Diogenes Laertius, Lives of the Philosophers. He wrote it shortly after the New Testament was written, right? So Diogenes Laertius, he has this collection of, I don't know, probably 60, 70, 80 chapters, each one dealing with a Greek philosopher. You will find there is nothing new under the sun. You think evolution is new? No, it isn't. Greek philosophers taught a version of it. Right? Everything that we see today is just repackaged ancient philosophy. Right? And if Paul could deal with it back then, we can deal with it today. It shouldn't cause us tremors of fear. Right? So here's Diogenes Laertius quoting or summarizing Epicurus's beliefs. Right? So, and I'm going to read through just 3 slides, so be patient. And I want you to think, what is missing from these explanations? What's missing? Something is blindingly obvious is missing from these explanations. Earthquakes may be due to the imprisonment of wind underground and to its being interspersed with small masses of earth and then set in continuous motion, thus causing the earth to tremble. The earth either takes in this wind from without or from the falling in of foundations when undermined into subterranean caverns, thus raising a wind in the imprisoned air. Sounds quite technical, doesn't it? Okay. Snow. I know you know what it is because you had it a couple of weeks back, didn't you? Right? Snow, white stuff, falls from above. Yeah? Keeps Michigan people busy for 3 or 4 months of the year. Right? That's snow. Snow may be formed when a fine rain issues from the clouds because of the pores, so there's holes in the clouds, are symmetrical and because of the continuous and violent pressure of the winds upon the clouds, which are suitable. And then this rain has been frozen on its way because of some violent change to coldness in the regions below the clouds. What do you think of that explanation? How close is he? Clouds, holes in it, the water filters through the holes, and then there's a cold wind underneath the clouds which freezes it and down it comes. Not too bad. Hey, remember, these guys didn't have Wikipedia, right? That's pretty good. Pretty good. Okay, one final one. The rainbow arises when the sun shines upon humid air, or again by a certain peculiar blending of light with air, which will cause either all the distinctive qualities of these colors, or else some of them belonging to a single kind, and from the reflection of this light, the air all around will be colored as we see it to be, as the sun shines upon its parts. How well did he do? That is really close. We've got little bits of water, and what's going through the water? Light, and then it refracts. Wow. What's missing? And he's got explanations for everything. What's missing from these explanations? God. You notice that? This is like me going to school when I was a boy and being told about the water cycle. Did we all learn this? Yeah. The sun beats down on the sea, and what does it do? Evaporates, it goes up, forms clouds, goes over the land, hits the mountains, drops its rain into the rivers and back to the sea. And you're thinking, what's God's role in this process? Does he just sit there with his feet up thinking, oh, I like it, it's a good show? Where is God in this process? Well, he created it. Right? What Epicurus is doing, he's saying, guys, the gods you believe in, these nasty, unpredictable, capricious gods, here is the good news. They live upstairs in the penthouse suite. We live downstairs. And ignore what you've heard about them. Yeah, you can't predict what they're going to... No, they are perfect. They're happy. Let's worship them. But the good news is they stay upstairs and we stay downstairs. They got to get on with their lives. We get on with our lives. They don't bother us, and we can live our lives as we want. Did he believe in the gods? Yes. But they're just not involved day to day in the experience of humanity. Not involved. We just tick along. Here was the moment where I realized that I needed to change my worldview. I was doing my master's at Newbold, and I had a course on Ellen White. Right? And it's worth reading Ellen White. I have seen, as I travel around the world, and I don't know which is the egg and which is the chicken, right? But Adventist communities that read Ellen White tend to be spiritually hotter than those that don't, right? And I don't know which way is it they're hot, therefore they read her, or they read her, therefore they're hot. I don't know which, but I just see the two tend to go together, right? So I was writing this paper on Ellen White. I had to write a paper for the course. And I decided to take all her letters from about the 1840s to the 1880s and just read them. Right? Because, we've read a lot of her books. I just wanted to see something different. And just to see what were the main themes. So I'm sat in the library at Newbold. They have an Ellen White Centre, and I'm working my way through her letters, one by one. I've got a good collection there. And then I get to this letter, which makes me fall off my chair. And it goes like this. She's writing to her brother, or to a brother, and she's describing how on Sabbath she had to go in the Michigan winter for a long journey to get to a church to preach. She gets up in the morning, and they're going on these sledges pulled by a horse, right? And she gets up, and one of her sons is sick. What are we going to do? He's so sick that I have to look after him rather than go and preach. Now, if that happened to me as a pastor, do you know what my wife would tell me? Cedric, why did you let John or Mark play outside in the snow yesterday without their coats? That's what she would tell me. And I would tell her, well, I just needed a break from them, my dear. Right? It was the easiest solution at the time. Right? Just needed a break. Right? That's not what Ellen White writes. Do you know what she writes? She says, Satan has attacked my son to stop me preaching. Whoa! Epicurean Christian. Influenced by his culture all around. The biggest problem we have in the West is a general perception that God is absent. That's the problem we have. That God, maybe he's there, but he doesn't interfere in things. You just live your life as you know it. And if there is a God, maybe he'll help you when you're really in trouble. The modern, this has come into our culture in the last 500 years. Poggio Bracciolini was the secretary to 7 popes, 1380 to 1459. Right? Remarkable guy, remarkable. When he's in his early 50s, he decides that he needs to change his life. Let me just make sure I get the details. I don't want to besmirch his character. So at the age of 56, he decides he needs to settle down. So he's living with a woman with whom he had had 14 children. 14 children. Now, that means that he knows her relatively well, wouldn't you agree? Right? He knows her name at least, right? Hey, you laugh. Recently, I just found out what my wife's name is, proper name, right? So you laugh, right? So husbands, just check, what your wife's name, or wife, let's hope it's wife, what your wife's name really is, right? So he's got these 14 kids, he's 56, and he thinks, I need to settle down, right? Well, we're not married, dear. Sorry, you need to go and find another life for yourself. and he marries a 17-year-old, right? Now, obviously, he recognizes that there might be sort of age-related issues, but he had another 5 children with her, right? So, you know, a happy marriage, happy marriage. So how many children did he have? I mean, that's nearly 20. And for some reason, with 20 children, you'd expect him to want to stay at home and play with them all day, wouldn't you? Right? That's what you'd expect. Instead, secretary to the Pope, secretary to the Pope, secretary to the Pope. He goes off on tours around Europe, around monasteries in France, in Germany, looking for old manuscripts. That's his hobby. And in one monastery in Germany, he discovers an Epicurean text, not written by Epicurus, but written by a Roman follower of Epicurus called Lucretius. And it's titled, On the Nature of Things. Now, what you know about Roman Catholic theology is that it is superstitious. It's rather like the ancient gods of Greece and Rome, except for you've just got one of them instead of many. That's why Catholics, when they give up on God, become atheists. When Protestants give up on God, they become agnostics. Right? So he discovers this text, and he starts reading it. You don't need to worry about these capricious gods, where you can never predict. Why? Because they live upstairs, and where do we live? Down here. And they don't interact. Therefore, this is the summary of Epicureanism, nothing to fear in God. You don't need to fear in God. Why? He's up there and we're down here, and he doesn't interfere. There's nothing to feel in death. Why? When you die, you're dead, and that's it. So don't fear about death. Oh, well, if that's it, what's my goal in life? Good pleasure can be attained. Do we live in a culture which believes God is generally absent? That when you die, you're dead? And if so, live your life to fill up your bucket with your bucket list. Get through it. Live your life for pleasure. Oh, and if there is pain, I can teach you we can medicate you. Doesn't that sound remarkably like our culture today? Epicureanism. Confessions of a recovering Epicurean. So, Poggio Bracciolini, some scholars think he was the Reformation before the Reformation before Luther came along. Right? But he introduced Epicureanism into Western culture. Where does that leave us today? We are moving back to superstitious era. That's the rise of Neo-Paganism in the West. Right? And for many, they believe that everything that happens in their life is because of either the god or the gods or the demons. Everything has a cause. Highly superstitious. Right? For Christians who are recovering Epicureans, right, this is where most of us are. We are what scholars call moral therapeutic deists. Right? This is the Christian version of Epicureanism. And it goes like this. If I live a good life, there's the moral bit. Right? So I'm going to do my best. I'm going to try and live a good life. The God who has minimal involvement in my life. So I know he exists. I'm convinced of that. But from a day-to-day experience, he's not that involved in my life. Right? But I'm going to live a good life. The moral bit. Moral, there's the deism bit. He has a minimal involvement in my life. And here's the therapeutic bit. He will give me inner tranquility and remove my anxiety. Most scholars think that that's what most Western Christians believe. Moral therapeutic deism. God is upstairs, I'm downstairs, I know I need to give a good life, because if I do, well, maybe God will pay me something and give me a degree of peace. Right? So, there's the introduction to my message. Let's get down to the Bible's response. Right? 4 things. And I'm going to go through these really quickly because I've preached most of this already. Right? we're finishing this morning, and I'm just recapping. How to leave this place, Drakensville, in the Drakensberg. Make sure you get the at the end, right? Somebody came up to me and corrected me, not here, but elsewhere in South Africa, right? Did I get it right? South Africa, in South Africa. Yes, we have to clip our nouns when we are in South Africa, right? So, how to make sure God is present as we go back to our homes in Africa, okay? In Africa. Because I know some of you are Zimbabweans, aren't you? Yeah, I've met some of you who are Zimbabweans, yeah, and praise God you came. So, here are the 4 things I want to go through really quickly, and then we will close. So, how do we bring God that we've pushed upstairs, bring him down? Well, first, let's recognize that his character is worth having in our everyday lives. He's beautiful, he's wonderful, he's merciful, he's gracious. Why would you want to push him upstairs? Keep him downstairs, right? Keep him downstairs. So, recognize the reality of your context. Welcome an envoy of Jesus. Meditate on God's involvement in history and listen to the proclamation of the redemption of the Lord. Let me run through these very quickly, and then we will wrap up. In my seminars on Matthew, I have shared with you that our context influences our experience of God. It influenced Jesus' experience. When he was in Nazareth, note what Mark says, he could do no deed of power there except that he laid his hand on a few sick people and cured them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. Was Jesus influenced by his context? Yes. Matthew, same story. He tweaks it a little. He, Jesus, did not do, not no deeds of power like Mark, but many deeds of power there because of their unbelief. Either way, Matthew or Mark, he was influenced by his context. Let's recognize the reality of the context in which we live. Kingdoms clash, and that impacts us, right? I've shared with you the basic principle, right? Yeah, that we took from 2 Chronicles. The Lord is with you while you are with him. If you seek him, what will happen? He will be found by you. But if you abandon him, what will happen? He will abandon you. The nation moves back from God. What does God do? Steps back from the nation. And who goes into the vacuum? Satan, the demons, and then he sends his prophets. Those localized presences, manifestations of the divine presence into that context. And it's chilling and cold. Pray for folk, believers in places in the world where their cultures are stepping back from God. Don't condemn them. Lift them up before the Lord. I've talked to so many of you who have lived in the UK, lived in the US, and moved back to South Africa for good spiritual reasons. So pray for your brothers elsewhere. Recognize that it will be the same in your culture at some point too, and prepare for that. Recognize how your environment shapes your Christian experience. If you don't do that, you don't know your own weaknesses and what you need the Lord to transform. So recognize the reality of your context, right? We all remember the Olympics that we just had, right? You remember seeing that? When I saw that, I thought, right, that's the end of my Olympics. That was a short Olympics. I mean, you know, if you're from England, the Olympics are rather boring. Yeah, we only win goals in things that you have to sit on. I don't know if you've noticed that about the English, right? It's either you're sitting on a bicycle, you're sitting on a horse, or you're sitting in a rowboat, right? So we're only allowed to win goals on things that you sit on, right? So I don't know what it is about our bottoms, but they're really good, right? Yeah, that was the end of my Olympics. I just thought, no, I don't want this stuff in my face, right? We recognize that is blasphemy. That is blasphemy, right? It tells you kingdoms clash and there is an active war going on around us, and of course it influences us. Second thing to do, welcome an envoy of Jesus. And I've shared this with you already, right? It's too late for me to introduce new material. It's Monday, right? Matthew 10, whoever welcomes you, welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me, welcomes the one who sent me. And we've been unpacking that during our presentations. So, you welcomed me to Drakensville, but you weren't just welcoming me. Who do I represent? Jesus. And who does he represent? The Father. You, I pray, have welcomed the Father's presence in amongst you, right? So if you are feeling that God is up there and you're down here and he's not involved, invite people into your life who are envoys of the Master. Spend time with them. Spend time with them. Because they're not just Mrs. Jones or Mr. whoever. They are envoys of Jesus, who is an envoy of the Father. They're bringing the divine presence from up there through Jesus, who was sent, through the person who was sent into your life. Right? It's another way we can fight Epicureanism. Spend time with those who've been sent by the Lord. And I could list folk who've had a huge impact on me spiritually. You meet them every so often, you just think, whoa, I want to be like that. Right? I remember taking a mission trip to Hungary. And we would, for lunch, they would send us out to members' houses. And there was this elderly couple, right, who'd been Adventists for a long time. They couldn't speak English. We couldn't speak Hungarian. Nobody speaks Hungarian apart from Hungarians, right? You know this, don't you? Well, yes. Pastor Edmund speaks Hungarian, right? He's one of those unique 144,000 who does, right? And I went to Hungary, I don't know, 6, 7 times. They kept giving me books how to learn Hungarian. I kept going and thinking, nah, not for me, right? But this elderly couple, they would come and they'd bring in food to us, right? Put it on the table, and then this elderly lady never forgot. She'd just come, she'd turn around and smile, and we'd start eating this food, and then she'd just start laughing. And you know, I thought, if that's what 40, 50 years of Adventism does for you, I want that. That's what I want. I want to just be able to look at this Englishman eating his lunch, right? And somehow, that's what I want. I want to be surrounded by people who've been touched by the gospel. That's what I want. To see it transform people's lives. Welcome an envoy of Jesus into your life. If you've pushed God up, let people who bear the name come into your life. Third thing, if you're not feeling God's presence in your life, right, where has his hand been? Just step back and meditate upon his involvement in history. This is one of our strengths as a church, prophecy. Why do we study prophecy? It's not so that we can tell the time when the bus will arrive. It's to reaffirm this central truth. This is Daniel 2. We all know Daniel 2 because we've had the statue out the front, haven't we? Right? And I thought, there was a little one. I thought, oh, are those for sale? I'd like one of those. Right? Take one of those home. You know, the statue in Daniel 2 is not the central point of Daniel 2. It's a chiasm, and I know you know what a chiasm is. If you read Daniel 2, the center of Daniel 2 is not the dream. That's the illustration of the central theological truth, where Daniel praises the Lord, and he said, "Blessed be the name of God from age to age, for wisdom and power are his." He changes times and seasons. What does he do else? He deposes kings and sets up kings. Right? My granddad grew up with the empire on which the sun never sets. You know which one that one is? Pink. Who chose pink? Yeah, the pink. Have you seen on the maps? The British Empire was always pink. Yeah, I want to find that chap who painted it pink and just say, I need a word with you, mate. Right? Maybe the British Empire would have lasted a little longer if we chose a different colour. Right? Who knows? Right? Pink. Right? And I saw my granddad, yeah, in the 70s and 80s, and the greatness of the British Empire. Right? What does the Lord reveal to Daniel? He raises them up. So don't get too upset with the Brits. God might have done something through them. Who knows? Right? But then don't get upset when we leave. I know you'll miss me. I know you'll miss me. Yeah? Don't get too upset. Right? He deposes kings and sets up kings. There's a churn. That's what prophecy tells us. That God is in the business, not just of changing lives, individuals, but changing nations. We all know Josephus, don't we? We've heard of Josephus, Jew, lived from roughly 30 to 70 to 100 AD. Right? This is what he writes. All these things did this man Daniel. He's talking about biblical prophecy. This is a non-Christian Jew, and he's talking about prophecy about Daniel. Believe it or not, first century Jews also believed in Daniel. Leaving in writing, as God has showed them to him in so much that such as read his prophecies and see how they have been fulfilled, would wonder at the honor it's rather long-winded, this, isn't it? Wherewith God honored Daniel, and may thenceforth discover how the Epicureans are in error. Imagine that. A first century Jew, like Paul, and he knows who the Epicureans are. And what's his response? The Epicureans who've pushed God up, they're wrong. How are they wrong? Because we believe in Daniel. And what does Daniel tell us? God raises up kingdoms and he pulls them down. So sometimes you may not get that moment of God's involvement, 24 hours a day. Just step back and see the big picture. How he is involved in history. That's an argument, according to Josephus, against the Epicureans. And as Adventists, when we preach prophecy, at a minimum, we should praise God that he cares about this world enough to mess it up and to disrupt Satan's attempt to organize it as his kingdom. That's the third thing I would share with you this morning. And then the fourth thing, listen to the proclamation of the redeemed. If you've got your Bibles, turn to one of my favorite Psalms, Psalm 107. And I'm just going to whiz through this and then we're going to close. Psalm 107. It's really a Sabbath morning psalm, but bear with me. We can read it Monday morning. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, those he redeemed from trouble. Imagine you're in the temple and it's praise time. Right? When I pastored in one district, when I went to the district, right, the elders came to me and they said, Pastor, the last Sabbath of the month, make sure you don't put yourself down on the preaching plan. I was like, oh, that's okay. Yeah? That is Testimony Sabbath. Oh, what's Testimony Sabbath? Well, we don't have a sermon. On the last Sabbath of the month, right, one of the elders will choose some themed songs, and then we intersperse it with testimonies from the members as to how God has worked in their lives during the past month. Right? That is the thing that took that little church of 50 to 135 when I left. Right? The sense that God is not just up there distant, but is present and active. Testimony Sabbath. This is a Testimony Sabbath psalm. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Let them share their testimony. So we've got 4 testimonies. Here are the 4 testimonies. Let me read them through quickly. And maybe you will see yourself in one of these testimonies. If you don't, listen to them and listen to others here who might share testimonies similar to this. It will give you a sense that God is not distant, but he is present and active in our lives. So here's the first testimony. Verse 4, some wandered in desert wastes, finding no way to an inhabited town, hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted within them. What's their situation? They're lost. They don't know where they're going in life. Their life doesn't seem to have a goal or objective. Right? We all go through those times, don't we? It hits us every so often, periodic. Verse 6, then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He led them by a straight way until they reached an inhabited town. He heard their cry, and he gave them direction. Oh, let's just pause. Verse 8, let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wonderful works to mankind, for he satisfies the thirsty, and the hungry he fills with good things. The lost don't know where to go in life. They cry to the Lord. He says, go in that direction. Next testimony, verse 10. Some sat in darkness and in gloom, prisoners in misery and in irons, for they had rebelled against the words of God and spurned the counsel of the Most High. Their hearts were bowed down with hard labor. They fell down with no one to help them. What's their situation? Made bad choices, and they're in a state of despair. Almost depression. What do you think they should do? Cry to the Lord. And this is what they do, verse 13. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He brought them out of darkness and gloom and broke their bonds asunder. Let's join the praise, everyone. Verse 15. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wonderful works to humankind, for he shatters the doors of bronze and cuts in two the bars of iron. You think you're in a prison of despair? He can get you out. Then we have the third group. Verse 17. Some are sick through their sinful ways, and because of their iniquities endured affliction. They loathed any kind of food, and they drew near to the gates of death. Now, I don't think I'm quite there, because I quite like food still. Right? They're suffering the consequences of their actions, and they can't seem to escape them. What should they do? Cry to the Lord. So that's what they do. Verse 19. They cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He sent out his word and healed them and delivered them from destruction. Join in the praise if that's you. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wonderful works to mankind, and let them offer thanksgiving sacrifices tell of his deeds with songs of joy. So who have we had? We've had the lost, the depressed, those trapped in the consequences of their actions. There's one group still. One group still. Those whose lives are going well. Not everybody is crashing and burning. Some seem to be successful. Maybe you're in that group. Some, verse 21, went down to the sea in ships doing business on the mighty waters. These are the merchants, the successful people, going from port to port. They've invested wisely. They've been hard workers. They're busy with their lives, getting on with being successful. Verse 24, they saw the deeds of the Lord, his wondrous works in the deep. For he commanded and raised the stormy wind, which lifted up the waves of the sea. They mounted up to heaven. They went down to the depths. Their courage melted away in their calamity. They reeled and staggered like drunkards. They were at their wits' ends. Look, if your lives are going well and God is not involved, I pray he brings a storm into your life. That is my prayer. That he brings a storm into your life so you realize your need for a deeper strength than simply human success. When you're in the storm that he's raised up, what should you do? Then they, verse 28, cried to the Lord in their trouble. He brought them out from their distress. He made the storm be still. The storm that who created? He did. You know, sometimes we need to pray for peace. Sometimes we need to pray for storms. Right? What should they do, if that's your experience? Verse 31, let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wonderful works to mankind. Let them extol him in the congregation. This is public testimony. If your God dwells upstairs and you dwell downstairs, surround yourself by the testimony of those who've cried to the Lord and who have experienced deliverance. You see, this God is incredible, right? The psalmist finishes with a description. Verse 33, he turns rivers into a desert and springs of water into thirsty ground. You see, there's no problem which he cannot change. When he comes up to a river, what can he do with it? He can dry it up if he needs to. But then when he comes to the riverbed, which is dry and nothing there, what can he do to that? He can turn it into a spring of water. He has this ability to turn things this way and this way. A fruitful land into a salty waste because of the wickedness of its inhabitants. He turns a desert into pools of water, a parched land into springs of water. So there's the natural world. Look at verse 40. He pours contempt on princes and makes them wander in trackless wastes. Right? He can change things socially, but he raises up the needy out of the distress and makes their families like flocks. So he can come to the princes and do one thing, he can come to the needy and do another. This is a God who changes things. This is a God who is not up there on his own, isolated, uninterested in his people. This is a God who is working downstairs. Share your testimony. Share your testimony. Verse 42, the upright, they see it. What does it say? Their responses? They are glad. I pray that we leave this camp meeting glad, because we've heard the testimonies of what the Lord can do. We leave here uplifted. And all the wickedness, when they hear what the Lord is able to do, stops its mouth. closes it up. Let those who are wise give heed to these things and consider the steadfast love of the Lord. My prayer is that we will recognize the context in which we live. Let's be realistic. Let's invite those in amongst us who are God's presence. Let's affirm his involvement amongst the nations. And let's listen to what God has done in the lives of others. That's a good start. If, like me, you are a recovering Epicurean. Amen. I believe we're going to have a final... I think we're going to sing our Northern Irish song again. Right? Northern Irish song. There you go. Can't escape us. Like the Lord.
Okay, let's stand all together. Sing it for the last time.